Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo, what up, Bolt fam? It's the director. Chargers fans, man, dudes, we got a big game coming up on Sunday, bigger than maybe a lot of us as Chargers fans even realize. Now, after last week's victory, the Chargers are now 4-2, but that was after a brutal defensive week last week versus the Broncos. Man, that game was tough, right? And maybe it blasted some of the Chargers' troubles wide open in terms of what they got to improve on going forward. These issues must show signs of improvement as the schedule is about to slowly and painfully and persistently get tougher as the year goes on. The Chargers got to start riding the ship as soon as this Sunday. This week, we do face the 3-3 Seahawks at the top of the season, right? We would have shrugged this matchup off, seeing as the Seahawks do not any longer have, Russell Wilson. They got Geno Smith out there. Maybe a bit of an easier matchup, right? Wrong. This Seahawks team has really turned it around and turned Geno Smith into one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So it's going to be a tough-fought match coming up on Sunday. And again, one that holds, consequences that are very serious going forward. So at this point of the year, I feel like they've proven they are not a team to be trifled with, these Seattle Seahawks. And the Chargers, man, can they hold on, let's say, another week while we wait for Keenan Allen and Joey Bosa and all these guys to return? We'll have to wait and see. Keep in mind that our much-needed bye week will follow this game in Week 8. So if the Chargers can make it out of this one, they're going to buy themselves some time to get healthy. Now, before we get started, quick shout-out to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I do have some picks in this one, guys. Of course, we're going to go over what I think is going to happen in this game, but I think both the Seahawks and the Chargers do tend to struggle versus the run a little bit, so I'm taking the over wherever I can find it in terms of those rushing stats. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100 and get in on the action. Before we do kick off, guys, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers versus Seahawks Week 7 game preview. Let's jump right into it, guys. We do have a pretty long list of stuff that I want to talk about in this one because, again, this is shaping up to be one of those must-win games for the Chargers, and it's one that I think the Chargers need to pay several, attention to in several different areas in terms of how they can improve from last week's slugfest on defense. So let's start things off with the injury report real quick and see what the Chargers are working with in terms of guys that are in and guys that are out. So Keenan Allen, of course, Chargers fans have been waiting a long time to hear this man's name called on and see if he comes back into the game Week 7. I don't know if it's going to happen this week, y'all. Of course, like I mentioned, the Chargers do have a bye week in Week 8, so I think in the long run, it may be more beneficial for the Chargers to let him sit through that bye week and hopefully come back at 100% in Week 9. It's going to be a tough matchup without Keenan Allen, but I think it's one that the Chargers have pretty little choice in the matter at this point. Will Clapp looks like he's back to full health there. Gerald Everett came on and off the injury report with an illness. He should be fine. Dustin Hopkins will not be suiting up, I think, for the next, 2 to 3 weeks or something like that, while he does rest up that hamstring. What an elite performance by him last week, but none of us expected him to come back this week either. So rest up, Dustin Hopkins. You had your moment. Go ahead and get healed up and ready to go later in the season. Zion Johnson is full. Sebastian Joseph Day has been limited. We're going to have to keep an eye on that because, of course, the Chargers' run defense already struggles enough even with him on the field. Not to say he's any part of the problem, but, man, we sure do need him to make sure the problem doesn't even get worse. We also do have Joshua Kelly, who is likely going to be out at least a few weeks. Of course, beneficiary, we're going to be having ourselves that bye week, so that should help a little bit. But, man, after seeing Joshua Kelly really pop off as a Chargers RB2, it really does suck to see him not being able to suit up for the next couple of weeks. Corey Linsley is going to be limited again with an illness. He should be ready to suit up on Sunday. Again, they called it a 24-hour thing, and that was days ago. I'm really hoping that he's kicked it by game day. I'm sure that he will. One of the biggest names on this list, though, is going to be wide receiver Joshua Palmer. Palmer. We're going to get more into the specifics of that in just a second, but Josh Palmer in concussion protocol. Brandon Staley very, very careful with the concussion situation as a whole. I would guess more than likely we're not going to see him suit up on Sunday. Donald Parham, same thing, concussion. Both these guys likely don't suit up for the Chargers. Then finally, Trey Pipkins and Kyle Van Noy. I would guess both of them do suit up. As for the Seahawks, pretty long list as well. Penny Hart, wide receiver, did not practice, might be out. Gabe Jackson, Tyler Lockett, some big names. Artie Burns, Isaiah Dunn. Kind of up in the air as to the statuses of all of these guys, but again, we can't really know till game day. But right now, I think most of them trending towards not playing. Uchenna Nwosu, the former Charger, should be suiting up on Sunday. Noah Fant should be suiting up after coming back from an illness. And then the rest of these guys, I think, will be suiting up on Sunday as well. So keep that in mind as we're walking through this game. The Chargers, again, I say both teams are going to be missing some pretty big pieces, but the Chargers definitely offensively are going to be hurting just a little bit. So let's jump into some of the specifics of this game and what I think the Chargers need to improve on from last week, which again showed a lot of struggles on offense. And that's going to be one of the biggest points of emphasis in this video is how can the Chargers get this offense back on track? Well, one of the first things that we do need to discuss is the wide receiver situation. This first segment called the wide receiver crisis. And this is something that we've been talking about the previous couple of weeks in terms of our depth. I told you guys, man, we're starting to test that depth a little bit, with Keenan Allen, Jalen Guyton, and then, of course, now Josh Palmer. It's starting to get down there, isn't it? And it's going to be another one of those games where the Chargers got to figure it out. Of course, the Chargers will once again be without Keenan Allen, their best wide receiver. Not to say Mike Williams hasn't been doing a good job. He's been fantastic, but there's only so much you can do when you're the only wide receiver out there with that kind of playability. Of course, these other guys should be pretty good as well, but it's not going to make it any easier. The recent loss of Josh Palmer, though, is going to be very problematic, as Josh Palmer has been that guy in the slot for the Chargers in the absence of Keenan Allen. Now, luckily, we do have a guy in Michael Bandy who I do expect to have a pretty decent day, as a matter of fact, on Sunday. I think that his capability in terms of route running, getting open, is going to be something the Chargers desperately need. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be one of those games where the Chargers are like, man, why haven't we been using this Bandy guy a little bit more in the absence of Keenan Allen? He's pretty dang good at football. So hopefully, if there's a bright spot, I think Bandy's going to get a nice opportunity to make some plays on Sunday. But the situation as a whole, the receiver depth is dwindling. Right now, Mike Williams, DeAndre Carter, and likely Michael Bandy will attempt to fill in on Sunday. But of course, it's not going to be as strong as a trio of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Josh Palmer. So the issue is, in my opinion, though, that even with the Chargers' talent stepping in, which could be a lot worse, the Seahawks do match up very well versus the Chargers' wide receivers. With no Keenan or Palmer, they can simply turn a lot of their focus to Mike Williams, which sucks, man, because Mike Williams, even without showing like the craziest statage this season, is having a very good year. Last week versus Pat Surtain and the Denver Broncos defense, of course he wasn't going to put up monster numbers. And this week, I think we could see a similar narrative in terms of the attention played. I would expect a lot of Tariq Woolen on Mike Williams this week, and he's been a fantastic, a stellar rookie cornerback this year. And you know what? The biggest thing that does separate him from other corners in the league right now is his height and speed. And of course, these both match up very well versus a guy like Mike Williams. So the jump ball this week's going to be a lot more difficult, but I would expect even more attention paid to Mike Williams, even with Tariq Woolen being the guy on him. Still, he is a rookie. I do expect more opportunities this week for Mike Williams to get involved than, let's say, last week versus Pat Surtain, but it is going to be a high hill to climb. I would expect a good amount this week, though, in terms of how the Chargers do attack through the air of Michael Bandy and Austin Eckler. I think that's where you're going to find the most success. But the Chargers at this point of the year, man, with everything that's going on in terms of the depth, in terms of maybe the struggling offense a little bit, I would say they would be very, very wise to seek a trade for another wide receiver, right? It's likely not going to happen until, let's say, next week in the trade deadline, right? There's not enough time to bring in a guy and integrate him into the offense before this game, in my opinion. But I think they need to make a move, and I think they got to do something quick, whether it be a free agent, whether it be a trade, which I'm actually all about right now. Something has to be done. As a quick note and maybe preview of a future video, I think names like Elijah Moore, Chase Claypool, Kendrick Bourne, these guys have been tossed around a little bit. I think the Chargers will be very wise to pursue one of them. Again, we'll discuss this topic further in detail in a later date. Next up, we got to talk about Joe again, man. Joe, my man. A couple of performances back-to-back in terms of play calling gave me a lot of hope that the Joe show was back on track. This last week, it got kind of bad there, man, for a while. We're going to call this one a mandatory level up in play calling. Joe Lombardi really has been up and down this season, right? Not very consistent, but has shown instances and flashes of really good play calling. He saw a solid run in, let's say, weeks 4 and 5. Very good calls. I liked a lot of what I saw in those games. But last week's game versus the Broncos was perhaps the worst of the year. It could be the worst of the last couple of years as a Chargers offensive coordinator. It was pretty dang bad. There seems to be a lot of hesitation for Joe Lombardi to execute anything, let's say, past 5 yards last week, and that really hurt the Chargers, man. It hurts the Chargers, especially on their third down attempts. The Chargers have not been great as far as a third down team this year. I believe they can be, but I do believe a lot of that does come down to the creativity or lack thereof in Joe Lombardi's offensive scheme and play calling. Now, I'm no offensive coordinator myself, right? Again, like I say all the time, Joe could talk, circles around me when it comes to X's and O's. But where I've seen this team find success, at least with my eyeballs as a spectator, is featuring its stars and testing the deep ball. When you really feature Mike Williams and Austin Eckler, good things happen. Austin Eckler really has, once again, emerged as that obvious guy that you want to run the offense through. And I think you want to get these guys more involved. But you also do need to test the deep ball a little bit. I think you can only do so much with Mike Williams as he's going to see a lot of attention. But then there's another guy in DeAndre Carter, who I think is more than capable of stretching the field in complement of Austin Eckler, attacking from underneath. He's once again, proved that he should be the centerpiece of this offense in Austin Eckler, and we should be continuing to use him just like in that way. I believe, especially while we sort out the wide receiver position, that again is kind of up in the air, the Chargers should heavily lean in on Austin Eckler. He is capable of holding down the fort at least one more week while we go up waiting for that bye week in week 8. And again, I'm no expert on the subject, but to me, play calling must improve in week 7 in order to get that rhythm back in offense. If we're to keep up with this vastly underrated Seahawks offense, we're going to have to dig deep into that bag of tricks. Now, keep the underneath work available to Justin Herbert. That doesn't mean to completely abandon, the short throws, but the creativity in moving the ball vertically must improve because you got to stretch out the field and give Justin Herbert more to work with. Luckily for Lombardi and Justin Herbert, they will have Corey Linsley back this week on the line, though. More than likely. Again, they said it was a 24-hour thing. He's still on the injury report, but I do think he should be back on Sunday. And Corey Linsley, if you've taken a look at the Chargers stats offensively when he's in or out of games, the Chargers are dramatically better when he is on the field. He is extremely valuable, one of the biggest parts of this offense. Believe it or not, the center, and he's going to be a big difference maker on Sunday, again, assuming he does suit up. I do think he will. Next up, we got to talk a little bit about the Chargers' running game, as I do think that's going to be a big point of emphasis on this one. Both the Seahawks and the Chargers do struggle quite a bit versus the run, and I think both teams have something in mind in terms of attacking the other on the ground. So I'm going to call this segment, It's Spiller Time. Now, it seems that the rookie will finally get his shot. Isaiah Spiller has yet to be active in any given game this year, and I was really kind of confused about that whole thing. We saw some nice flashes in preseason, and of course the Chargers and Sony Michel haven't quite gotten in sync yet, Sony Michel being a bit underwhelming this season. I do believe it is time to give Isaiah Spiller a shot. After a stellar start to the year, though, Joshua Kelly, the number 2 running back of the Chargers, has gone down with injury, and that really does suck. And that's a big part of why the Chargers offense, and Austin Eckler in particular, has been doing so well this season. We've been able to trust the number 2 guy out there on the field while Austin Eckler catches his breath. That's been a big part of that. He's not expected back for a few weeks, though, this Joshua Kelly, and that really does suck. But I do believe the Chargers have some guys that can step up into that role, right? Sony Michel, Isaiah Spiller, these guys got to step up and provide some stability at RB2. Now, I know it's going to be tempting for Staley just to roll out with Sony Michel as he's been the primary, let's say, RB3 this season. And we will see some Sony Michel on Sunday. I almost guarantee it. But even though I think, Sony Michel could do well, particular, versus this particular defense, I think with the likeliness of Spiller finally being activated this season, I do want to see what the Bolts have in the young rookie. Because I think we could be in for a surprise. If this season has taught us anything, it's that this rookie class is pretty dang solid. With the addition of, Zion Johnson, the triumph of Xander Horvath this year, and the emergence of Jamari Sawyer, the Chargers should really try their hand with Isaiah Spiller, who was considered a big steal in the NFL draft. I believe that Spiller has more to offer than we know, and I hope we unearth that potential in Week 7. We've seen a lot of opportunities given to Sony Michel that's resulted in around, 2 yards per carry. He's going to be in the mix this week, but I do believe that Isaiah Spiller has something to offer. And if there is a week that he can prove it, I think this would be a good opportunity for him to get more involved in terms of his touches. I think Isaiah Spiller could end up the Chargers' RB3 in the future, but in the immediate future, in the absence of Joshua Kelly, I'm more confident in Isaiah Spiller right now than I am Sony Michel. So let's make sure he gets an opportunity to prove that. Of course, there's the option or there's the possibility that he does underwhelm a little bit. But in that case, the Chargers, either way, are going to be eagerly awaiting the Joshua Kelly return, despite who decides to have a better game on Sunday. Next up, another issue that Chargers fans are kind of biting their nails over, and it's going to be J.C. Jackson. This I might call J.C. on ice. Not the fun on ice that we experience, at the stadiums every once in a while, but it's going to be on thin ice in terms of the Chargers and how they utilize J.C. Jackson. Because, of course, last week being benched after some really, really bad play decision-making and stuff on J.C.'s part, it's going to be tough. Now, J.C. Jackson's going to be another huge aspect to watch in this game because as of right now, I think it's been confirmed that he is starting. But after being benched in Week 6 versus the struggling Russell Wilson offense of the Broncos, it's hard to believe that the Chargers will be as lenient with him in a much tougher matchup versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now, like I said, JC has been announced the starter in Week 7. I think, of course, that's to be expected. You don't pay a guy $85 million and don't give him a chance to bounce back. He will get several opportunities this season, right? But I'd have to imagine he'll be on a short leash with the Bolts. Because with the talents of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant to worry about, JC is going to have to step up if he hopes to stay on the field. We'll likely see a lot of J.C. Jackson in particular on DK Metcalf this game, their number 1 wide receiver. And I hope and pray we see a new version of him on Sunday. But there is a scenario like we saw last week, or I should say earlier this week, that if he does struggle quite a bit, let's say to start this game, we could see Mike Davis inserted as soon as the first quarter because we can't prolong that and wait for J.C. Jackson to catch up. DK is a fast and physical wide receiver, and you know what? J.C. Jackson in years past would have been a solid and fine matchup against him. But to defend DK, you need to match his physicality, especially with the size difference. I think J.C. Jackson somewhere around 5'11", and then there's a 6'3" wide receiver in DK Metcalf to worry about. I'm worried with JC's struggles in zone coverage in particular, it's going to make it very difficult for him to contain a wide receiver like DK. But you know what? I've given it a lot of thought. And again, I'm no expert, but I got a plan, at least a method of thinking that could help JC Jackson out quite a bit. JC has struggled in terms of the, grasping the scheme this year. That's a big part of it. I think that recovery of the ankle injury should be mostly behind him by now. Right now, it's all a mental game. And he's, again, very much so struggled to grasp the scheme of the Chargers. He's very much so in terms of why the Chargers picked him up, his skill set in terms of where he did find success. He is, without a doubt, a press man corner. And the Chargers, they've definitely been leaning towards zone this year, right? But it's not to say man is off the table. I think the Chargers should see if JC can handle his zone assignments early in this game. But if he struggles early, swap him out for Mike Davis. But let's not be done with JC in the game. Let's see if we can lean in on JC Jackson and that skill set in man coverage like he used to with the New England Patriots. Bring him in on man coverage plays. Make him do what he did in New England and found a lot of success in. Let him gain some confidence back. I think that's a big part of the formula here for JC. I think we could see flashes of what made him so dominant last season and the seasons previous. So I think there's an opportunity to use J.C. Jackson in there somewhere, but the Chargers need to be smart about it. In zone, if he continues to struggle, lean on Vato, but let's give some opportunity to J.C. in man coverage. Sure, it could become a tell, right? Whenever we see 27 walk on the field, the opponent's going to be like, oh, well, they're in man coverage. But unless they match a lot, most offensive coordinators will sniff out man coverage anyway. So might as well insert JC on his strengths for right now while he uses some time to catch up his zone assignments. Let's use JC as the playmaker that we know he can be. But let's do this in a way that he does feel comfortable for now. He will need to adjust to the Chargers scheme eventually. But as we are in the middle of a season right now in Week 7, we don't have time to wait for him to catch up. So if we're going to use JC, let's use him intelligently. And let's see if we can find a method, a rhythm for him to find some success. But we cannot wait for him. As of right now, I think Vato, Michael Davis, is a much better option in zone coverage. But if we want to mix him in on man, I have no problem with that. Next up, we got to talk a little bit about, again, probably the biggest, featured stat on both teams going into this week for each of the offenses and defenses, and that's going to be the struggling run defense of both teams. This segment's called Watch Out for Kenneth Walker. I think that the Chargers' run defense has been very up and down this year, right? But as a whole, when you take a step back, it's not been great. And I think, similarly, the Seahawks have a lot of struggle versus the run as well. And I think both teams have a plan to attack the other with the same method this week. The Seahawks, they have a lot of running in their plans this week. Rookie Kenneth Walker, is shaping up to be one of the best rookie running backs of the season, right? And that's with a couple of good rookie running backs this year. Of course, Dameon Pierce in the conversation as well. Breece Hall. I think Kenneth Walker could end up being the best one. And it's going to be one that I think the Seahawks are very much so wanting to get involved this week in particular. The Chargers will need to look to contain him the best that they can, because he could run away with it. But it's especially difficult for the Chargers to contain running backs when their quarterback is mobile. And Geno Smith carries a lot of potential to take off for 10-plus yards on the ground as well. The Chargers have historically been pretty bad, struggled versus mobile quarterbacks. And more so, it really does open up things for the opponent's running backs. When you're not sure which one's going to take off, a lot of the times you're going to bite on the wrong one, and there goes the running back for 20-plus yards. The Chargers got to find a way to identify those situations and stop it. I think the Chargers, despite that, though, unfortunately, are going to give up a nice chunk of yards this week on the ground. I do. But if they can compose themselves like they did, let's say, in Week 5, you guys remember that game? Nick Chubb was running all over us in the first half. I think they had something like 150 yards on the ground in the first half. Something clicked. I think Sebastian Joseph Day must have said something in the locker room, and they came out and only limited their running backs to about 50 yards in the second half. That's really good. If the Chargers, again, who I do think are going to allow a good amount of yards on the ground, if they can compose themselves and find out and getting back in rhythm and how to stop and slow down the run offense, I think there's a chance that the Chargers can get away with this one. I do. But in terms of shutting down or at least slowing down Kenneth Walker, we got to find a way to slow him down. But they can bend, but they cannot break. And they're going to have to sort it out and figure it out at some point in this game. So finally, I think one of the biggest aspects for the Chargers in terms of trying to win this game, because again, the Seahawks are a very, very formidable opponent, one that we cannot take lightly. I think one of the biggest aspects of this game, at least for me, is going to be the defense. This segment called Time to Make a Play. I believe the defense is going to need to step up once again. Last week in that slugfest, man, oh man, this defense had to get some work done. It was a tough game out there. Derwin and Mack will lead the pack in hopes of slowing down Geno Smith this week. And again, it's kind of crazy we live in a world where Geno is that guy, but he is that guy, man. Geno is that guy. He is the Russell Wilson of years previous. He is that good. And we got to sort out a way to slow him down. But where I think it is most vital for the Chargers defense and the team as a whole to try and grab a win this game is going to be generating turnovers this week. I think the Seahawks are going to put up points. I do. I think it's going to be very tough for the Chargers defense to have a, let's say, stellar game. I think they could have a good game, but a stellar game I think is a little bit far out of reach. This Seahawks offense is very good. But the Chargers are going to have to keep up, right? Seahawks are going to score. Chargers are going to have to keep up. And giving Justin Herbert extra possessions is going to go a long way to keeping the Bolts in front. Despite the missing elements on this defense, Joey Bosa, et cetera, we still got Derwin. We got Khalil Mack. We got ASJ and Bryce Callahan out there. They can turn this game on its head with a big play at any given moment. Even J.C. Jackson, right? He is capable of this in the right situation. If the team can find a way to unleash him, a big play by J.C. could be a very vindicating experience for number 27. Either way, I think the team who can find a way to generate turnovers will end up on top, and it could come a lot of different ways for both teams. Tariq Woolen, I think Kobe Bryant as well. Man, we wanted both those corners, did we not, in the draft? Those guys have been stellar for the Seahawks, both in fumbles and interceptions. Uchenna Nwosu, I think, has 3 sacks this year so far. He's been very solid like he was for the Chargers. That team can generate turnovers, but so can the Chargers. And I think the team that can generate more turnovers, in the end, as simple as it may be, could end up being the victors in this one. So that leads me up to my score prediction on this video. And this one may be a little bit shocking to some people, but I'm going to stick to it, okay? After a defensive slugfest on Monday versus the Broncos, I think the script might be flipped this week. I think it's going to be flipped on Sunday. And I'm expecting a moderately high-scoring game. So in Week 7 versus the Seattle Seahawks, my score prediction is going to be Chargers 34, Seahawks 31. I know, I'm going to get some flack for the Chargers aren't allowing 31 points on Sunday. They could. I think the defense is very good in some games. I should say in some circumstances, some situations. In this game in particular, though, I do think something special exists in Kenneth Walker. And I think he's going to put on a show. I think he's going to put up some pretty serious numbers in terms of rushing yards. But similarly, I think the Chargers DBs and those defensive backs, especially if JC can stay on the same page, or if Michael Davis comes back and has another good game, I think they can handle business. But I think what's really going to help the Chargers and what's really going to be important to this team is generating turnovers, giving Justin Herbert extra possessions to sort it out. Because like it or not, I think he's going to need him this week. Without Keenan, without Palmer, with the offense struggling the way it has been, I think he's going to need a possession or two extra in order to keep on top of the Seattle Seahawks. So my bottom line on this one is that this is going to be a battle, a big one. I think this game's kind of flying under the radar for a lot of people. The Seahawks are on the cusp of creating a good situation for themselves with a win in Week 7. They're a good team. They're a good team, I think, all around. And if they can make it out of this week with the win, it's going to go a long ways to the rest of their season. A record of 4-3 for the Seahawks in the middle of the year looks a lot better than 3-4. Like, just think about that. 3-4 versus 4-3. I think you got yourself a good opportunity for a good second half of the year at 4-3. 3-4, though, it's a lot harder to climb out of that hole. And the Seahawks are going to know this. They're going to come out swinging. And with the Chargers being down several stars right now, even though the bye week is so close, they're going to need to be extra cautious with how they proceed. They are so close to their bye week in Week 8. If they can make it out of this game 5-2 in the season, right? We may be ready to take the season on by its horns, right? With the return of Keenan Allen, soon after, Joey Bosa. This is a big game for the Chargers. But the Bolts aren't done. This season is painstakingly looking like it's on an upward trajectory, right? The Chargers, we've got the wins, 4-2. It looks really good. But with all the setbacks, right, it's going to get tougher. It's going to get tougher. If they can buy themselves some time in Week 8 to try and get healthy, maybe sort out some other situations in terms of play calling and personnel, things could look a lot better going into the second half. But remember, the second half of the schedule is a lot tougher. So they got to try and start, sorting things and getting things straightened out right now versus the Seahawks. This Week 8 bye could not have come at a better time. Make it out with a win, and you'll have time to reevaluate. Get your stars back from injury, and maybe make an addition or two on your offense to help them better perform. This game is bigger than what it looks like on the surface, and Chargers fans at this point should know it. So I have it as one of those games that could explode point-wise, right? I think if Staley and Lombardi can stay composed, stay steady, keep their creativity and, turn it up to 11 and rip the knob off, they could find a way to come out on top. But I cannot stress this enough. Do not underestimate the Seattle Seahawks. I know it can feel that way sometimes. It felt like they were going into a rebuild year. No, they're a good team. Do not underestimate them. Keep your foot on the gas and play an aggressive game if you're the Chargers. But try to find stability, especially on offense. That's what's going to be very, very tough for them this week. And the defense needs to step up and provide extra possessions. I think the team with the more turnovers, with the better turnover ratio, could end up the victors here in Week 7. Well, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think are some of the more important aspects going into Week 7 versus the Seattle Seahawks? What do you think Justin Herbert and the offense can do to help massage some of the problems that we're having in terms of personnel and keep the momentum going, even if the Chargers are staring at a pretty, a large score in terms of points scored this week? Let me know what you guys think the Chargers need to do offensively to help right the ship. And let me know what you guys think about Isaiah Spiller. I know some people are a little higher on him. Some people are a little lower on him. Give me like a realistic number that you think Isaiah Spiller could achieve this week, right? I'm guessing he gets 7-8 carries this week, maybe on the high end, and I'm hoping that can amount to around 50-60 yards. If he can do that, I think we're in really good hands. But there is the chance that Isaiah Spiller needs a little bit more time to acclimate, and maybe that's why we haven't seen him activated so far this season. Anyway, let me know all you guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. If you did enjoy this content, we'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. We don't have the jersey on today, but trust me, we will on Sunday. We'll see you guys then.